Hi, everybody. I'm Ron Brooks. I am the owner and principal consultant of Ron Brooks Consulting. Glad to be with you here today to discuss something that's been really big in the industry as of late. And we're talking about the dangers of lab shopping in the cannabis industry, how it unfortunately is a reality that is undermining our otherwise legitimate industry. A little bit about me. I am the former lab director of Bell Costa Labs. Worked with several other cannabis labs prior to and after that. Have been consulting again out on my own since about 2021. And, I'm glad to be helping other labs establish a good, firm scientific background in the industry. Um, and today I wanted to come to you guys and talk about something that's plaguing the industry, and it has been for a long time, and hopefully we can put an end to it here soon. So our learning objectives today are threefold. The first is to understand what is lab shopping. It's to really understand the practice of lab shopping in the legal cannabis industry, how it works, including potential impacts on public health and safety. We'll also look at some of the regulatory challenges. We'll identify these regulatory challenges that are associated with lab shopping and explore some potential solutions to help, mitigate the problems and the risk associated with this practice. And also, we're going to look at the importance of cannabis testing. It's not just to get a number, unlike some people think. So, really, here I hope that everyone can develop a deeper appreciation for the importance and even the difficulty of cannabis testing and how lab shopping really compromises the integrity of this process. So the first thing let's do is let's look at the role of cannabis testing labs. In the early days, cannabis testing labs really just looked for potency so you could put a number with a product other than just saying it was highs, mids, or lows. In today's industry, cannabis testing labs are in this highly regulated chain of custody environment that requires every participant to hold a license. um, Labs themselves are private entities that are permitted to work in the cannabis industry. But if you really think about it, cannabis testing labs are not really cannabis businesses. For me, I would say that cannabis testing labs could more accurately be described as quality safety testing labs that specialize in cannabis testing. Um, the reason for this is a couple fold. Um, Really, let's look at the functions of what testing labs really do. The first is quality control, obviously. You know, Quality control insofar as, we are there to protect public health. Um, we want to make sure labels are accurate, and we want to be able to identify and disqualify any of those contaminated products that we may encounter. So the lab really is a border to the legal industry. We're the ones that are kind of in control of making sure everything's safe. The second function of a testing lab really is research and development, and this is where labs will partner with cultivators, with manufacturers, with processors, and work on product development. Or, if there's a problem in, say, packaging of a drink, what's causing, is there leaching, is there something like that? This is where cannabis testing labs, acting as a specialty lab, not just as a cannabis business, helps the entire market. And these tests that happen are beyond the regulatory scope. We hear ISO accreditation, ISO 17025, but the tests that happen with research and development are individualized and custom that, are going to be beyond that scope of accreditation. So labs need to have skills beyond just being able to test for potency and for pesticides. Now, lab shopping. We hear about it all the time, but what is it? Lab shopping itself is a dangerous practice in the cannabis industry. And this is where companies will, shop around lab testing results from multiple labs in order to get the test result that they most desire. This can be anything from, an increased potency value, or hearing a rumor that maybe this lab is easier on pesticides, that their limits of detection aren't quite as low, that maybe they don't test heavy metals as well. So it's shopping for that favorable result if it's just a value to make a product look better, or B, something more nefarious and trying to get something out to market that wouldn't otherwise pass. But why is lab shopping so prevalent? Why can't these manufacturers, these cultivators, stick with one lab? Why are we seeing this? Well, it's become a real common practice because, like I said before, labs act as a gatekeeper to medical and retail sales. Without a passing C of A, products can't legally be sold. That's where the black market comes in. Lab shopping really exists. I would say largely because customers, being your manufacturers, your cultivators, in California, your distros, are looking for passing results with the highest potencies. And that's unfortunate. What are some of these reasons that we're seeing it so much in the industry? Well, I'd say for one, there's a lack of standardization within the testing procedures and regulations. No two states' testing regulations look the same. No two labs' procedures are going to be exactly the same. When these things vary, you're going to have varying results. It's inevitable. Now, will it be by less than a percent? Will it be by tens of percents? Well, that remains to be seen depending on the science that's involved behind it. Another reason are the financial incentives to cultivators that engage in lab shopping. So, the financial incentives, it's not just like you're looking for a deal at TJ Maxx. These financial incentives are more because our uneducated consumers out there are looking for the highest potencies and are willing to pay for higher and higher potencies. So cultivators are incentivized to find a lab that's going to give them that most favorable result. Um, and they're not worried about the science behind it. Lastly, lab shopping, it creates some inconsistency between labs. Different labs, as I say, may have different methods, which lead to potentially different results for the same sample. Now, this can ultimately cause confusion and even more mistrust to people that are otherwise questioning our industry. Now, people may ask, well, is lab shopping something that just happens in cannabis because of the situation that we've created? Well, it doesn't. It happens in other industries too. And one famous case is going to be with the Peanut Corporation of America. Peanuts, yeah, I can figure. So in 2009, the PCA caused an outbreak of salmonella. This outbreak resulted in more than 700 people's infected and 9 deaths. The company knowingly shipped a batch of contaminated peanuts after lab shopping for a negative result. The CEO, in an email that he received asking why there was such delays, and someone responding back that they were waiting for a negative result, his response was, just ship it. Well, that former CEO with his lovely picture there was sentenced to 28 years in prison because of this. Um, it's a big deal. There are more negative impacts. So that happened in the peanut industry, and many people may not be aware, but because cannabis has been in such a negative light for so long, we're going to get sensationalized stories about this. So there are a lot of negative impacts that lab shopping can have and has had on the legal cannabis industry. Um, I'd say one of the biggest negative impacts is lab shopping can lead to unregulated products that would otherwise not be safe for human consumption, or at least per our regulatory bodies, being released on public shelves. There have been recalls. There have been other things that have happened because labs have let products slip through. Um, Next, we have misleading lab results. So, lab shopping, again, as we've said before, inaccurate label claims may entice or mislead a customer. Like I said, higher THC percentages equal more money at the end of the day for the retail shop, for the distro, for the cultivator. So there are those incentives there, but it's a negative impact. Our customers in this industry, our consumers aren't the most educated. It's the equivalent of, say, going into the liquor store looking for a good bottle of wine and just shopping on percentage. Well, then you're coming out with a bottle of Everclear. I've never done that. And I don't think many people have. So, why do we do that in cannabis? More on that later. Um, Lastly, and a big negative impact is unreliable quality. Lab shopping solely for looking for a passing result will lead to unreliable and inconsistent product on the shelf. Um, Inconsistent product is dangerous to our industry and will erode consumer trust at the end of the day. And that's the last thing that we need while we're trying to build this industry further. Now, the impact of potency inflation. Um, it's happening everywhere. We're seeing it. It's making public news. Um, it I can't emphasize enough that a lot of this is going to come down to better education of our consumer. But until then, we have this problem. Well, it's happening more and more and more. And recently, there was an expose that happened in New York. A New York insider went out and grabbed 8 samples in the public and had that was publicly available and had it tested. Um, and these are their results. You have of these 8 results, 3 are within what I would say are a normal standard variance. One at just under a percentage, that's great. That was labeled accurately. 2%, that's fine. 7.5%, it's good. If you look at the actual percentage number, the label claim was 27%, which was an even square number, to 25.03. This happened because they were allowed to pre-label with anticipated potencies. Well, labeling with anticipated potencies caused, one product to be labeled at 33%, but it was actually 21, and that was a 43% difference. 2 others, 35 and a little under 36% difference. Um, when you see this and you have news stories that talk about these differences that we're seeing on our labeled products, of course, it's going to cause erosion and even more distrust in the legal cannabis market. And that doesn't matter if it's medical or recreational. It's another reason to cause a black eye for our industry. This all comes down to inaccurate testing results. Too many negative consequences and risk for inaccurate testing results. One, um, it leads to negative side effects for the consumers. A consumer may think they're consuming a higher potency product. Well, in fact, it's less, and they eat more and more, and that can cause negative effects one way or the other, being too much of an experience or too less of an experience. Or trying to properly medicate and not being able to alleviate that symptom because a product says it's a certain potency when in fact it's actually less. Uh, Inaccurate testing results can lead to contaminations with pesticides and other harmful substances. Um, if we don't follow regulations and we don't test this thoroughly, and our test results are not accurate, people could get sick from pesticides, from pathogenic molds, from residual solvents, and other potentially harmful substances that we may or may not be testing for. And lastly, more importantly, the point that I've been harping on a lot is that inaccurate testing results will ultimately cause damage to the legal cannabis industry. That is the absolute last thing that we need. And like I said, it's a practice that needs to stop. There is a real necessity for accurate lab testing in our industry. Accurate, unbiased lab testing is essential for our industry to succeed. Um, with it, we can ensure consumer safety and add that layer of legitimacy that we need. It's unfortunate that in 2023, we're still having to convince people and legislators about the benefits of cannabis. However, we're shooting ourselves in the foot whenever we're not releasing accurate results. There are lots of risks that are associated with lab shopping and lab fraud. And these are risks both to the public and to cannabis businesses as a whole. First, as we've talked about multiple times already, is the risk to public health and safety. Lab shopping will hurt public safety because we could be releasing products that can make people sick. Another risk is the legal and financial consequences of lab shopping or fraudulent results. And we'll talk about that here in just a second. And then again, further damage to the reputation of our industry. From 2017 to 2022, here's a brief timeline of some of the incidents of lab fraud that have been reported. In August of 2017, the Washington Liquor and uh, Cannabis Board suspended the certification of peak analytics. We have an incident in California in 2018, in Michigan in August of 2019, Oklahoma in August of 2020, December 2020 again, Washington, January of 21, Nevada, November of 21, Arizona, May of 22, Oklahoma. So it's not one market, it's been in multiple. More recently, we have seen an uptick in legal cases. In 2022 and 2023, we've seen at least 5 cases that have been brought. 4 of these class action cases against large manufacturers for potency inflation and label claims for inaccurately labeling THC content. We have one at the bottom that also involved a lab being sued for inaccurate THC content, and this was in Arkansas. So we are seeing this uptick of suits, and I don't believe it's going to stop anytime soon. We've created a problem in this industry by trying to sell or having the consumer purchase based off potencies. It's led to more and more lab shopping. It's led to worse and worse THC and potency inflation. So, with all the doom and gloom, what are some strategies that can be implemented to be able to tackle lab shopping? We can't just focus on what has happened. We need to be able to look forward. We need to have some sort of way to be able to get past this um, so that our industry can improve, so we can show everybody that we really are legitimate. Well, some ideas. One is standardized testing procedures and regulations. Um, I think this one's important. Um, Standard methods would act a long way to making sure results are similar between labs. Um, there will still be differences, but hopefully those differences will not be as large as what we've seen in some of the differences in some of the cases in New York. Um, Next would be consistent regulations too. Pesticides in each state are different. What pesticide, the number of pesticides are all different. Um, Uniform regulations may also help. I think something else that we really need is improved communication and transparency between labs and cultivators and also regulators. Um, there needs to be transparency there. We need to have labs that are willing to stand up and say, look, at the end of the day, the results that we release are accurate. We have gone through validation studies. We have proven that our methods are accurate and not bow to customers demanding, oh, my flower's 30% when it's not. Um, we we need cultivators that aren't that we need cultivators that are more willing to accept the lab's results and not push them for higher and higher. Um, Next, regulating the accreditation of labs. Um, ISO is required for, I believe, almost all laboratories at this point. However, what I would like to see is more involvement from the state regulatory bodies. There needs to be a better program for them, for labs to know what's happening, for there to be a, say, inspection criteria list that labs know when the state's coming in to do an inspection, beyond that of just annual ISO audits, of internal audits and the like, of, say, pulling data, random data package pulls. We can do more than that, and I think our regulators can do more than that. Lastly, we need more education. Um, we need to better educate cultivators and consumers about the dangers of lab shopping. We need to educate consumers that THC percentage is not the only metric for which to buy cannabis. Um, if we implement some better strategies, we can hopefully reduce the prevalence of lab shopping and ensure that, our test results coming from all of our labs can be trusted as accurate and reliable. Recently, there was the release of the Bright Guide to Harmonizing Cannabis Testing Standards. Um, I think this document does a lot to bring our industry together. Uh, I think it's a lot to be able to implement, but I think this is definitely a starting off point. Some points that they make are the importance of standardized testing methods. If you can standardize the methods or at least have a standard metric, you can tighten up quality control and quality assurance and make sure that the quality of the products being released to the market are better. Um, there are challenges in cannabis testing. It's not easy testing. You can't just take a bud and throw it into a machine and it'll tell you all the pesticides and heavy metals in there. So we need to have a better job of the cannabis labs themselves communicating and not acting like everything and every method is a special and unique snowflake. If we have more cooperation together as labs, I think we can come together to make this industry even better and more trusted. Um, ultimately comes down to the stakeholders. The stakeholders in the industry need to not just push the label on having the highest potencies or the highest this and the highest that. The stakeholders need to provide education. The labs need to provide education. The state regulatory bodies could do that as well. And I think if we all come together as an industry, we can hopefully eliminate the problem that we've created. But at the end of the day, the only conclusion that I can really come up with is that lab shopping is a dangerous, dangerous practice that should be avoided at all cost. Um, if you're a cultivator or someone that's guilty of doing this, take it upon yourself to make the industry better and stop. If you're a lab, take it upon yourself to not bow to customers that are threatening to pull business because of lab shopping. It unfortunately happens. It's happened to me during my time running labs. It's happened to my customers. So all that I can say is let's all act better as an industry and do what we can, and let's stop lab shopping. Let's come together and have a better industry. Thank you guys for your time. I really appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of the conference.